Arya, a 44-year-old man with a weary face and deep gaze, worked there as a park keeper. Since he had set foot in this park, strange and unfortunate events began to occur. At night, when a thick fog enveloped the park, and the silence was only broken by the sound of the wind, Arya saw creatures that were neither human nor animal. They appeared among the trees, with red eyes that glowed in the dark, and voices that seemed to come from another world. Arya could never fully see them, as they always hid in the mist and shadows. During the day, he tried to erase these images from his mind, but signs of their presence remained. Objects mysteriously moved, and sometimes sounds came from afar that had no source. Arya knew that these creatures were somehow connected to him, but he couldn't understand why or how. Every night, with increasing fear and anxiety, Arya returned to the park, among trees that seemed like indifferent observers. He knew there were answers, but every step he took towards the truth drew him deeper into the realm of darkness and the unknown. It was a cold and dark night. A thick fog had enveloped the park, and Arya was the only keeper left there. He sat in his small hut, listening to the sound of the wind, when suddenly a familiar yet terrifying sound startled him. It was the sound of footsteps slowly approaching the hut. Arya went to the window and looked out, but saw nothing but the fog that covered everything. He decided to go outside and see who or what was in the park at that hour. With a flashlight in hand, Arya left the hut and moved towards the sounds. With each step he took, the sound of the footsteps grew louder, but there was no sign of anyone's presence. Suddenly, among the trees, he saw red eyes staring at him. Arya stopped and took a deep breath. He knew these eyes belonged to the same creatures he had seen before, but this time they were closer, and he could feel that they had surrounded him. A murmur began to swirl in the air, and Arya felt the ground beneath him shake. He ran quickly towards the hut, but the more he ran, the hut seemed further away. Suddenly, a cold and invisible hand grabbed him. On that fateful night, Arya was pulled towards the darkness by a hand that couldn't be seen, but was felt. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The fog had engulfed him, and the more he struggled, the more he sank into it. Arya came to and found himself in an unknown place. He was in the center of the park, a place he had never seen before. A massive and terrifying statue stood before him, with eyes that seemed to glow even in the darkness. Arya slowly moved towards the statue and reached out his hand. Suddenly, the statue moved, and a thunderous voice was heard. "Why are you here?" a voice from the statue asked. Arya couldn't respond. He could only stare into the deep red eyes of the statue. At that moment, other creatures appeared from among the trees, each with a different shape and size. They slowly circled around him, and Arya felt that he was part of a strange and incomprehensible ceremony. The murmurs grew louder, and the ground beneath Arya shook again. He looked up at the sky and saw that the moon had turned the color of blood. Suddenly, one of the creatures stepped towards him and extended a hand that seemed to be made of fog. If you enjoyed it so far, please hit the subscribe button if you liked the video. When Arya regained consciousness, the sunlight was filtering through the leaves of the park's trees, heralding another morning. He found himself beside his hut, seemingly abandoned there by the creatures after some unknown enchantment. His body felt weak and frail, and he sensed an invisible force rampaging within him, as if something from the park itself had taken root in his being. Arya couldn't bear this condition. He went to his employer, his voice trembling, and said that he could no longer work in the park. The employer, a middle-aged man with a stern face, looked deeply at Arya and said, "Aria, you cannot leave. The park needs you, and you need the park." Aria asked in astonishment, "Why? I can no longer stay here. Something inside me is tormenting me." The employer replied softly, "The old park has secrets that only you can uncover. The creatures you saw are messengers. They have chosen you too." At that moment, a formidable sound emanated from the heart of the park, and the ground beneath them trembled. Aria ran towards his home, but with each step, he felt the park pulling him back. When he reached his house and looked in the mirror, he saw something that made his heart quiver. Aria, now shadowed by a cloud of doubt over his soul, was seeking answers for his peculiar condition. Thinking he might be going mad, he decided to seek help from friends and acquaintances. After much inquiry, he obtained the address of an old man said to be a master of arcane and hidden sciences. With heavy steps and a heart filled with both hope and fear, Aria went to the old man's house. An ancient home adorned with strange symbols, nestled in a narrow and quiet alley. Aria knocked on the door, and the old man, with a wrinkled face and penetrating gaze, opened it. Without hesitation, Aria began to recount his tale. I am Aria, the keeper of the town's old park. Things have happened to me that I can't explain. At night I see creatures, and now I feel that something is inside me." The old man listened intently to Aria's words, then placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Aria, you are not alone. This park, this town, and even this world are full of secrets that ordinary eyes cannot see. Come in, let's see what assistance I can provide you." Aria entered the house, and the old man led him to a room filled with ancient books and odd artifacts. The old man began to read signs and cast spells that could guide Aria. The master of arcane sciences, with a deep and knowledgeable gaze, said to Aria, "The park where you work has been built upon land that was once a site for ancient ceremonies. The spirits and entities you see are remnants of that era, still seeking liberation." Aria, now with his eyes open to the hidden secret of the park, listened attentively. The master continued, "The charm I have written for you contains words that can protect you from the influence of these beings. Never part with it, and recite it every night before you sleep." With trembling hands, Aria took the written charm and thanked the master with a voice that came from the depths of his heart. With his steps now lightened, he headed towards his home. The air was clear, the sky was bright, and Aria felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Upon reaching home, he placed the master's charm beside his bed and fell asleep with a sense of peace that had long been lost. The nights no longer brought visions of creatures, and the strange sensations within him ceased. Aria was able to enjoy life once again, and the old park seemed to have made peace with Aria's spirit. And so it was that Aria, the keeper of the old park, with the help of the master of arcane sciences, returned to his normal life.